So in this video, I'm going to talk about how trauma can bring you in to a higher state of consciousness. Now, for somebody who's experiencing trauma, who's in a state of being affected by trauma, whether that's a one-off challenging incident or whether that's a period of time where you were traumatized, where difficulty and challenge was happening in your life, there will be a density of energy within the nervous system. And that dense contraction of energy in the nervous system, which was actually created to keep you safe, which was actually created to protect you, protect your body as a protective mechanism, that density within the nervous system will also be creating neurotic, fearful, worrying, anxious, depressive thoughts in the mind. And so someone who's experiencing trauma gets pulled into this state of suffering, this real state of density inside. And before the trauma happened, whether that was when you were a very, very young child, or whether that was later in life, if you had traumatic things happen to you later in life, before the trauma happened, there was a big, wide, open spaciousness within your being. So you see in a young child who isn't traumatized that there is this open, spacious expression of joy, peace, exuberance. You can see it in the child's eyes, in the way they laugh, in the way they move their bodies. There is a freedom of expression there. Spirit is moving through the child completely freely. The child isn't controlling their experience. That's why kids are such little weirdos. They're running around like little weirdos everywhere. They're not trying to control their experience. But then traumatic things happen. And then that child that was so free, so exuberant, so just a flow of life force energy, holds on, contracts down, realizes it's not safe to be in their authentic expression. So that energy that they were when they were a child, that exuberant, expressive life force energy, that spiritual energy that they were expressing, gets contracted down, and they start to hold on. And the body holds on, and the body starts containing and repressing the joy that they were expressing as a kid. Now, if one difficult thing happens, then perhaps over time that releases, and the child may go back to being a full expression, fully exuberant in their life force energy. But then something else might happen, and the contraction comes in again, and the energy system is contracted down. Now, if somebody goes through enough trauma, then the contraction gets so much that there's almost no openness anymore. And that contraction in the system is trying to work its way out, and in doing that, it's creating lots of neurotic thinking in the mind, and we get pulled into this state of suffering. Can you feel the density in that? Can you get a sense of the density in that? You probably feel it in your own experience if you are experiencing trauma. Now that is just a holding back of your life force. It's a holding back of actually a spiritual energy inside of you. And we experience it as pain and fear, and lots of challenging, difficult, dense feelings. Now, someone who's experiencing trauma might eventually find their way to spiritual teachings which start to free one from the neurotic thinking. We start to realize that we're not the thoughts that are moving through the head, that there's a space here. There's an awareness which knows these thoughts. And that awareness is not afraid. That all the qualities of suffering we've been so used to living by, that we feel like that's become the essence of what we are. There's this suffering, this density. All of those qualities when we start to get in touch with this awareness, those qualities of suffering aren't present in it. There's something here which is innately free of the suffering. There's a peace in that awareness. There's a joy in that awareness. And that recognition in itself, that there's something here which is already free, can start to free up and start to release some of the contraction of that energy of trauma within the system. And so that dense contraction of trauma, which is just life force energy, any pain you feel, any emotional pain, is contracted life force energy. That contracted life force energy then starts to open up. And when it starts to open up, it starts to shine. It starts to shine brightly. And this brightness starts to pour into your experience. The vibration that felt so low when the trauma was there, it's almost like an alchemy starts to take place when we start to wake up, when we start to free ourselves from the mind. This alchemy starts to take place, and that alchemical process turns that density, that contraction, into light. And then we start entering into higher states of consciousness. But there's more to this, because usually for the trauma sufferer, simply recognizing the freedom of awareness, which I say it like that, and it's and it is simple, but it's not easy. It takes a real sincerity and a real love for freedom to be able to then say, okay, yeah, there's an awareness here which is free. But at first we need to do inquiries. We need to be very perceptive within ourselves. We have to be so dedicated to truth, so dedicated to freedom, in order to free ourselves from that mind. But even in freeing ourselves from the thinking, for the trauma sufferer, that doesn't necessarily free up all of the energy in the body. It may free up some. It may transmutate some into light. But the trauma sufferer usually needs to take another journey as well, which is they need to take the journey downwards, to connect, to meet, to become intimate with the very holding patterns within the body, to bring attention, to bring awareness into the body. When we bring awareness into our body, when we meet it with presence, when we touch in with our body with presence and meet these contractions of energy, then through shining the light of our presence into these contractions, again, they start to open up. They start to melt. I like to think of it as like the trauma is like a block of ice, or blocks of ice within the body. And our presence is like this beam of warmth, this warm light, and it goes into these contractions, these densities, and it starts to melt them. And this density, remember, it's your life force energy, the same life force energy that filled you with goodness when you were a child. The trauma is the same energy that filled you with goodness when you were a child. So when we start to meet it with presence, it starts to melt. And that goodness, which you knew as a child, that light that you were before you experienced the trauma, it starts to shine back through your heart. And then you start to become somebody who is free from the mind, and also has your life force energy freed up to flow through your nervous system. And this brightness starts to come online. And where before you may have been moving through life in the ordinary state of consciousness, identified it with the mind, but maybe not particularly suffering that much. When the suffering comes in, that forces you into this alchemical process whereby you have to transcend the mind in order to be free. You have to. And you have to meet the body and transmutate this contraction of energy. And for whatever reason, there is a transformation of consciousness that takes place through that process. It's like caterpillar. The caterpillar is us going through life in ordinary consciousness, and then the trauma is the contraction of being in the cocoon, and then we learn these practices, whatever they are, to free us from the mind, to free up our life force energy, and then that caterpillar becomes the butterfly. So yeah, I talk about it as if it's simple, because it is simple, but it's not necessarily easy. You have to be incredibly dedicated to freedom to go through this transformation. There needs to be a dedication. It's possible for everybody. It's possible for everybody. No matter what condition your body and mind you find your body and mind in. If you're listening to a video like this and there's a resonance there, it's possible. But you need to commit. You have to know it's possible, and you have to commit your life to it. You have to give your life to being present for yourself. Being present with yourself. Being present with your body. Choosing freedom instead of choosing to go along with every negative thought which is coming up within your mind. You start to choose freedom. Okay, my friends, thank you so much for listening. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Much love to you. Thank you.